this video, we are talking about the lunar and solar impulses, how we work with them, and how they are expressed through Venus. So, when we come from Venus, we have two options or stargates that we can come through, and one is lunar and the other is solar. So, hello everyone, my name is Valeria, and in this channel we talk about spirituality and esoterics. So, there are two stargates that are connected to Venus. You have stargate number 2 that connects to Venus at the galactic level and the inner Earth. Okay, so you can come from Venus through the inner Earth, and then you have a connection through Stargate number 3. That is our very same Stargate. So this is more direct. Here you come through the surface. So you incarnate through a womb of a human, and sometimes you can come like a visitor, like in ships or spacecraft. So when you come through the inner Earth from Venus, that is a lunar incarnation, a feminine incarnation. And when Venusians come through the inner Earth, that is indicating a lunar epoch for the Earth. Some examples are Lemuria and the Hindus, okay? Then you have the option of coming directly from the sun. This is a solar incarnation. Here, this incarnation is guided by the sun. You are guided by the sun. This is more masculine. And some examples are Atlantis and our current epoch. As you can see, it depends on the stargate that Venusians are using, the kind of epoch that we are going to be experiencing, be it lunar or solar. That is because Venusian beings are initiators for humanity. When we come through the inner Earth, we have this blue skin. That is because to pass through that stargate of the inner Earth, um, you when you pass through that, you enter in contact with the sphere of Amenti and the frequencies of the fifth dimension. And remember, the fifth dimension is associated with the color blue. So that is why we see Hindu gods in this blue color, the same as some ET beings, because they are expressing the fifth dimensional frequencies on the earth. When we come through the sun guides our incarnation, and we are reflecting the very same frequencies that are on the surface of the earth. So you can barely tell the difference between, we all come through a womb of a woman, but when some Venusians come more on this external way as a visitation through landings like spacecraft, you can barely tell the difference between that Venusian beings and a human that is still from Venus but was born through a woman. Okay, so our current epoch is more masculine. We came through the sun, we incarnate through a womb, and we have experienced some landings, That is why in recent history we have a lot of ET visitations that are more external, not that much through the inner earth. But in more ancient times, we have this whole mythology that involves beings coming through caves, through the depths of the ocean, through these passages on the mountains like the Tibet and so on. If Venusians come to the earth through the inner earth, that epoch is going to be more of a lunar epoch. And if they come through the sun, that means that the sun is guiding this epoch for all of us. And what I have experienced is really interesting. It's like hearing the sun telling me where to incarnate for this incarnation and what to do, and the sun has been kind of guiding me toward enlightenment, okay? And the sun and the moon are two impulses that can guide our incarnation. And you can see some cultures honoring more these ideas of emptiness, dissolution, the void, like Buddhas, cultures that were following more the moon and the feminine. And then you have other cultures honoring the sun, the masculine. They sometimes reject the other aspect and end up experiencing it, but in a very distorted way, like the lunar sacrifices of the Mayans. Okay, so why this epoch is a kind of second Atlantis? The idea is that Atlantis was a solar epoch. Then we had lunar epochs. You can see that with cultures that were before Christ, like Hinduism, and since Yeshua was born, we have been in a solar epoch, and we are coming closer to a golden age of this epoch. And that is why we say that this new earth is more of a second coming of Atlantis instead of Lemuria. Probably ancient cultures from the India were more of a second coming of Lemuria. And you know, the Lemurian inheritance is about connecting with our bodies and movement prayer. That is something that in the East has been a lot more present than the West. Um, and the West is more solar. The new Atlantis is going to exist mostly in the Western countries. Um, as this is a solar epoch and we are approaching a golden age, that is why we say that we are repeating Atlantis, but without the distortion, hopefully. Okay? The fact that an epoch is more solar, more masculine, a second Atlantis like this one, does not mean to completely reject the feminine, the lunar mysteries, because when you reject an impulse, you have automatically its shadow expressed in society sooner or later. A lot of times the solar epoch rejects the feminine and looks for enlightenment, but is a kind of enlightenment that is ungrounded. Enlightenment without the feminine is not grounded. They often reject the lower chakras and even the body as means to attach a higher spiritual states. They often also reject everything like specific guides and specific impulses in the name of source. I am talking about this one later. And we can see that today in some spiritual communities uh, that reject the feminine, even if they don't say that, with those words, but through their beliefs and their teachings, you can see that very clearly they are rejecting the feminine. They only worship the sun. Enlightenment from the crown, from the third eye, from the mind. And even in some twin flame communities, and this one is very sad for me personally. And and other teachings are also a good example of that, when the goal is to inflame union and oneness with God, but only the masculine God, the masculine aspect of Source. When that is your goal, there is not a lot of space for the feminine, for the void, for the descending. And we have to descend in order to completely ascend, okay? And my view is that the ungrounded enlightenment is about leaving all part of yourselves that are not light. You just, leave them in the lower worlds. While grounded enlightenment is about sharing the light with your shadows through alchemy, but not by avoiding what is in the shadows, because you have to see the shadow in order to share the light into the shadow. And that is how you ascend, not by, denying anything that you don't like or anything that is not solar. And it's the same in the terms of an epoch. And both paths of enlightenment are going to allow you to experience oneness. um, but the feminine path is a lot deeper. You feel that. It feels more complete and more real. You go there with all your body. Um, and this path takes longer. That is the problem with the twin flame teachings, that they want you to reach union as soon as possible, even if that means to completely miss or reject the feminine, okay? So here you have to choose which path you want to experience, okay? But God, Source, loves you also in your shadow, okay? It's more like enlightenment comes to you and from you, and Source awakens inside of yourself instead of you going to God or to Source as if it were something up there, okay? And it is important to integrate both impulses or forces inside of ourselves. Of course, we live more as the epoch in which we are, in this case, solar, and it is really important to understand the epoch we are living as society, okay? That is something that people in the spiritual community have to know, okay? But that doesn't mean to reject the lunar impulse. We are always integrated what we learned in the previous epoch. So for example, we want in this epoch to learn about the lunar, but under some kind of structure of the masculine, okay? And when you connect with the lunar and solar impulses in alchemy, you can notice that the sun actually expands. It's about the collective, about helping the collective. And that is why it is associated with golden ages, with civilizations thriving, while the lunar is more contractive, is more about going inwards into the detail. You can learn really specific things here. Hindu mysticism is full of symbology and details, for example, and we don't remember that as much as a golden age, but the wisdom is really deep, okay? Um, so, for example, you need to go inwards because you are learning something new. Here you have Lemuria. You were learning how to be on Earth, and then in Atlantis, you already learned that. You learned something, so you can shine that wisdom into the collective. And this is why right now everyone wants to help the collective and share what they know. Okay, so Stargate number 3 is the solar plexus also. It is the sun. It is expanding, while Stargate number 2 is associated with our sacral chakra, with our inner healing, with going inside in a very deeper way, with also retreating ourselves. Um, and that is why in more kind of recent years, as a collective, we have been talking more about feminine healing, about our sacral, and because we are ready to integrate more of the feminine teachings into the solar teachings. Okay, the same with movement prayer, for example. We have been kind of retrieving that in the West. Um, but other cultures have been doing that always. But we know that that is still useful for us for our spiritual paths, and that is why we kind of use some of those ways of spirituality also. So the lunar mysteries of Venus have to do with the feminine, with the body, with movement, also with communing with the stars in a simple way. The way we interact with the stars is even different depending on the epoch. In more lunar epochs, we were working more with fixed stars. In the solar epoch, you can tell that astrology is more focused on the celestial bodies, on planets. So, again, when you see blue beings in mythology, that is often referring the past through the sphere of Amenti, through the inner earth and the fifth dimensional frequencies. You have beings from Hindu teachings, beings from ancient Greece like Aphrodite, Poseidon. They are more lunar beings. Also, here you have mermaids, nymphs, the ocean, dolphins, the inner earth through the ocean, Polynesian cultures that were similar to Lemuria, New Zealand, Hawaii, Eastern Island, using the observation of the stars for sailing, like the physical observation of stars. Okay, uh, people that feel that they came from the ocean and from dolphins are usually Venusian beings that have come through the inner earth on past lives, and they remember that like at a subconscious level. So there is a good amount of mythology that tells how beings, embodiments of Venus, fell and then reascended. They went to the underworld and met their shadow aspect, and then ascended, but not fully, not by rejecting their shadow, but by embodying it, and by doing some sort of alchemy. So Venus, for example, became Lucifer because it fell, and here I don't mean Lucifer as a force that Steiner talks about. I have this old video in Spanish about Harriman and Lucifer. Maybe I will add captions in English if you are interested, because it's a really good video. Though I don't resonate that much with anthroposophy, but when we talk about names like Lilith, Lucifer, they are very tricky because what people mean by them is different in different teachings, okay? Lucifer can be this really distorted impulse, I believe in Gnosticism, for example, is a bad thing, okay? A bad being. So here I am talking about Lucifer as the star, okay? Lucifer became the morning and evening star that is Venus, always ascending and descending. We also have Inanna that met her shadow sister in the underworld, and the mythology of fallen angels in general. You have to discern if you know if the fallen angel is a false light being, or if is an embodied being that fell and then ascended, okay? um, I am talking about descending to really meet our shadows, not about, truly distorted beings. When we resonate with Venus, we are usually not afraid of our shadows. If you have a strong Venusian resonance, you don't even like to be called like an angel or so. I know I don't like that myself, okay? Because I have purified a lot of things that were in the shadows, and I choose not to live in the shadows, but I don't like to reject parts of myself, as a being that is on the earth right now. So, the history of Venus as a planet, it also tells about collectives of beings that fell in what we would consider some kind of Luciferianism or so. Uh, but they then started to embody more of the masculine and reascended. That is why Venus is a powerful initiator, because they are not like perfect angels that never fell, okay, and don't understand the earth, okay, and at the same time they are not distorted beings that fell and continue in this falling state, and they don't want to ascend, and they are super vampiristic beings, okay. So Venusians initiate us. If Venusians come from one stargate, we have some sort of epoch, and this is a lot to say. So I want to share the reasons for that. So I wanna first share my view about Venus. I don't consider Venus like the higher self of the Earth, and to understand why, we want to understand spiritual science and the galactic history. So Venus will be another aspect of the Earth. Okay, when the Earth is in the fifth dimension, or Astara, and all those aspects of the original Earth were separated. So the Earth that we live in right now is just another aspect, the same as Venus. So each planet is an aspect and stored something regarding the original Earth. And Venus stored a lot of wisdom regarding the rose. Venus stored teachings of the original Andromeda civilization regarding feminine teachings. Andromeda is our most ancient origin, even considering Lyra. I have some videos about Andromeda. So Venus is storing a lot of important wisdom, and there are more reasons as of why Venus initiates us. So when it comes to stargates, Venus is the main planet of our solar system that is directly connected to the Earth, and that is why how Venus relates with the Earth tells us a lot about how that epoch is going to be for the Earth, be it more solar or lunar. Uh, The Earth is also close to Mars and Mercury, but the only planet with which is literally sharing a stargate is Venus. And as I shared before, Venusians descended and reascended. They passed initiations so they can initiate us because they understand. So when you are very connected to Venus, you are always shown when you are facing an initiation through symbology and in your dreams. So they really try to make sure that you don't fail the initiation. So we have Lemuria as a lunar epoch, then we have Atlantis as a solar epoch, and also Egypt, more solar. Uh, Remember that you always have lunar and solar deities and temples in whichever epoch, so don't let that confuse you. And sometimes it's not that clear the epoch in which we are if you are not really connected to those impulses. And then you have the Vedas and Hinduism, which is before Christ, okay, and even a bit before ancient Greece. And then when you have cultures that were alive before and after Christ, you can tell how they were a bit lunar but then more solar. So here you have clearly the Mayans before Christ and after Christ, also Greece, okay? Uh, then we have the Essenes and Yeshua and Christ being born, okay? That is more recent and more solar, and especially Mayans, Hindu beings, they are very Venusian cultures, okay? And another example is Isis. Um, for example, in Egypt, she was a solar deity in really, really ancient Egypt, like Atlantis. And then, when Greeks started to have some power in Egypt, Isis started to be more of a lunar goddess. You can tell that very ancient Greeks were following more of a lunar stream. That is why you see Aphrodite as Venus coming from the inner earth, coming from the ocean. So, beings honoring the sun, like Mayans, making sacrifices in the name of the sun, is an example of a solar culture that rejected the lunar impulse, and then the lunar impulse had to go to the surface in a really distorted way. And then people believe that all lunar impulses are bad. And when I say reject, I know they were still talking about the moon. They had a calendar, and the moon was the goddess of fertility, and so on. Uh, but still they were following, like treating only the sun as the god, and rejecting aspects of the shadows, because that is the only way in which you can then have distorted rituals. When you are suppressing something, if you have distorted rituals of sacrifices, it's because you have been repressing the lunar forces. So we have a text that I don't know how to pronounce the name, so I'm going to leave the name here, that talks about the creation of the sun and the moon, and it is very interesting. This talks about these two brothers that went to the underworld, again Venusian mythology, and they had to pass tests, which is again Venusian initiations, and they are described as very different heroes. So the lunar god is like handsome and surrounded by willing young women, often seen in watery places. How amazing is that? And the solar god is a hunter. He's not shown like being with any women, okay? You can tell that they were perceiving the lunar aspects in this more Luciferic idea. Uh, almost indulging with a lot of different women and being handsome, like the aspects of Venus that relate with beauty. Um, and Inca, Mayans, and Aztecs, they had the sun, as this god, as the most important, and they believed that the sun would not continue its journey across the sky if they did not make the human sacrifices, and they were doing these ceremonies in temples to sacrifice people, also animals. Here, for example, some kings of the Inca civilization, they believed they were descendants of the sun, and that is probably because they knew they were from Venus. Uh, and you can tell the space the moon was using as goddess of fertility and giving birth and food, while the sun was like the king, the god. Okay? And that is super important. A lot of people in these days they have been part of these civilizations, and they are trying to really care about these kind of beliefs in the spiritual community. So you have to use your discernment a lot. So when you come through the inner earth portal and the sphere of Amenti and the fifth dimensional frequencies are there, you're going to be irradiating the fifth dimensional frequencies, and that is reflected as a light on the skin. If you want to come as a Venusian in the external way, you can do that by making your particles vibrate slower. It's like you compress a bit your frequency, and they usually come from very short periods of time. Okay. um so yes, the sphere of Amenti has been entering and leaving the earth's core, and it was of course available until Atlantis and Egypt, and then it was available for the Hindus in a different way, because in Egypt and Atlantis we had these interdimensional portals for ships and spacecraft to come physically. So you didn't need really the inner earth portal only that much. But then, as that interdimensional portal was vanished, the inner earth was like the main option used by Venusians from Hindu times, and that is why they were coming, reflecting the blue light. Okay, it was a very different way of entering the earth than it was for Egypt and Atlantis. So, alchemy is about the solar and lunar impulses. The alchemy with both impulses is part of the path of enlightenment, and is something that you are going to experience at some moment. Both impulses have their distorted examples, and all of those are forces that we want to heal or embody, depending you want to discern each force. Okay, so you have to first be aware of the shadow in order to discern. Each goddess, they are representing aspects of source, and so on, and see if they represent something you want to heal in yourself or that you need to embody. They are also archetypes, so you don't want to deny those parts of yourself. I have realized that we need to embody the lunar and solar impulses in sacred marriage on the inner as part of the path of enlightenment. We need grounded enlightenment, as I said, and grounded enlightenment is so common in some spiritual communities that only worship the sun, but the sacred marriage that brings actual enlightenment is experienced through solar and lunar alchemy. It is often easier for people to see the distortion here, like in the lunar impulse, like dissolution and contraction that gives a distraction, like Kali, Lilith. People tend to reject them as forces, as goddesses, as archetypes, and you want to be aware of those impulses, discern and integrate the shadow, and not to avoid it. You want to see how you want to deal with it, really. uh, People often see the distortions in the lunar impulse, but not that much in the solar. Uh, the moon, the moon is an impulse that goes beyond the physical moon. When we focus only in the material aspect of the moon as being a replacement of the original moon, uh, and here you can again see how we are in this solar epoch that only talks about the moon in the more physical aspect. Even if that is true from the galactic history perspective, then you miss depth, okay? Because lunar is our shadows, the feminine, and the feminine in her shadow aspects, okay? Uh, Shadow does not mean something bad. It means something that is there, but you are avoiding, you are not seeing. So within each, the feminine and the masculine, you also have an approach to each of them that can be more feminine or more masculine. You have feminine and masculine aspects of the feminine, for example, so you want to be aware of that. And you can notice that people that reject the dark or shadow aspects of the feminine are often the same ones that only want the sun, the masculine side of spirituality, enlightenment from only the mind, but not from the body. When you live like that, you often struggle with your physical body. Sometimes you get sick, you lack creativity, or you lack the power of manifestation and creation on the physical, okay? So some feminine archetypes that are in the shadows are actually useful to work with, okay? And to heal and to integrate them, okay? And that doesn't mean that you are this bad being. And I understand that we are in this solar epoch, but still on an inner level, we always need both forces in harmony, and the only way to accomplish that is through descending and retrieving our feminine aspects that are in the shadows. I feel that there is an initiation in which you are directed toward only the sun path and grounded enlightenment. Um, and in my case, that felt as if I was like missing like the half of myself. And there are different teachings that try to guide you toward that kind of enlightenment, and some of them are really based in manipulation techniques. And that was a really hard initiation for me, and that is why I am making this video right now. So, we tend to believe that lunar forces are often distorted while the solar teachings are not, but that is not true. The thing is that the solar distortions are not mentioned that much, and I have two great examples of highly distorted solar teachings that have costed lives and souls, okay? So, we have the Templar solar initiates, and that was a group that was present in Atlantis, and I mean the previous version of Atlantis, when the Earth was in the fifth dimension, okay, as Tara. Um, a lot ago than our Atlantis and Lemuria. But this group was controlling Atlantis, and they were good beings with good intentions at the beginning, collaborating with the Syrian Council, following the sun, um, and they then started to resonate with Anunnaki beings and revealing from beings from Sirius. And then 550 years ago, the power generator crystals that were underground in the old Atlantis exploded, and that was due to the Templar solar initiates' misuse of power from the core of the earth or of Tara. Okay, so you can see what the distorted solar impulse and the distorted masculine as an impulse can do. It also destroys, but it's like outwards, going to the outside. It destroys the whole collective. Okay. Um, so we have a second example which is more recent on the earth and is a really sad example. So is the order of the solar temple that was mostly in Europe. Uh, I found this on the internet. So this is what the internet was saying, okay, about the aims of this order. So this was they wanted to, and I am, reading. They wanted to correct notions of authority and power in the world, an affirmation of the primacy of the spiritual over the temporal. You can see this sounds kind of yes, I mean, but they say assisting humanity through a great transition, preparing for the second coming of Christ as a solar god king. Okay, can you see what I am saying? Okay, and then it says that of course this drew some inspiration from Crowley, okay, and the Golden Dawn teachings. Okay, so you can use your discernment, of course, but they were accused of performing rituals related with mass suicides and murders. So you can see again this idea of worshipping the sun, the god sun, the king, and the lunar aspects being rejected and then coming to the surface, anyways, in very unhealthy ways. And in general, we have also some systems of magic that follow the sun and the solar impulses that have become really distorted. And again, they are more for the mind, they miss depth sometimes. So again, use your discernment, but a lot of us we resonate with magic, and it's very sad that um they are a lot distorted truly. And it is important to discern the lunar and solar impulses in the systems of magic and the huge distortions that can be there, as they are more related with the astral. Okay, so a lot of people in the new age talks about working with deities as something that needs to be transcended in order to work directly with Source, as if that was the goal. But the thing is that we need to describe and experience the many attributes of Source, because Source is undefinable, and that is why we experience Source through experiencing its aspects and attributes. So, goddesses, deities, archetypes, impulses are really focusing the power and of Source in particular ways. So there is this idea of only being in the love of Source and completely rejecting the different aspects as archetypes and so on. Uh, and that is very dangerous. That happened in Egypt when the traditional ways of working with these gods and impulses was changed to only worship the god, the sun, okay? And then Egypt fell. And you can see now people rejecting galactic forces, astrology, angels, and so on, because they believe that sovereignty is about connecting only directly to Source. But what they don't understand is that when you completely deny the expressions of Source, you are also denying Source, because nothing is separated from Source. Okay? That is why acceptance is important. Um, and of course, this is not about treating these forces as gods in the way of placing them as above humans. I believe this is our main wound as spiritual community, and that is why we are so afraid of doing that again, of placing these gods, goddesses as more than humans, that a lot of people choose to just reject them completely, okay? But that is only the other extreme, and we are going to have the very same bad result. That is a lack of sovereignty anyways, even when you believe that you are going toward sovereignty, you are doing the complete opposite. So if you want some more clarity about the inner earth and the sphere of Amenti, about this blue color, you can watch this video, and remember to subscribe to this channel, and thank you so much for being here today.